I'm so fired up. Thank you for taking some time for us, Coach.
Absolutely. My pleasure, man.
We got to dig in because there's a whole new, since the last time we spoke on this podcast, this is a different wrestling world. How would you describe the NCAA wrestling landscape as we sit in May of 2025?
It is definitely changing rapidly, I think, on all fronts. But you could also argue that it's still the same powerhouse programs at the top. I just think the game has changed. And there's a number of programs that are willing to adapt, and there are some that I think struggle with that. And that's a question we have to ask ourselves. What are we willing to do to stay in the game? And it's become increasingly challenging for sure, especially with the NIL and transfer portal. It's just a nasty combination with no guardrails. But again, you either adapt or you die, and we're trying to adapt the best that we know how to the highest level that we possibly can. And with that, I think we're having some success. But we also, we got hit a couple times, as as well too.
Yeah. So when you say teams are starting to, or some teams have struggled with the adaptation, how do you think that manifests itself in their day to day? What does that look like in their day to day? What is it when you see a team that just can't compete in the recruiting landscape? What does it look like? What do you see from afar?
So what I see from afar and being in some of these recruiting battles is that the dynamic has just shifted. And I think you may have some traditionalists that have been around for a while that have seen some success maybe earlier in their career, and now it's just become overwhelming and almost too much to fight for the top level talent. And then I think the dagger in the heart is when you do get the kid that maybe was overlooked and you develop him, the risk of losing them. And I think that's the tricky part. I think that's the one that hurts the most. I think you look at the top 100 kids, I think the spread is still relatively similar on how many are going to a Power 5, how many are going to a top 10 versus some of the mid-level mid-majors. But then on the back end, I think the risk of losing your best guys is the part that is the scariest for many. And I think what you do as a coach and as a leader is you try to create value outside of just financially, but also you need to make it clear that if anyone on your program hits a certain threshold, then they'll be compensated appropriately. And hopefully that number is enough, coupled with the trust that you built, coupled with what we're doing is working from a developmental standpoint. And you hope with all those things in place that you got a pretty good chance of keeping your best players. And even with all that in place, I still think there's just so many variables, and you're probably going to lose a couple, and that's just something you have to learn to deal with.